where did I put it? Ah, there it is. Alright. Alright, I feel like this is appropriately silly for the subject matter of the video.
Thousands of years ago, before the dawn of man as we knew him, there was Sir Chucky of Cheese, a rat-like creature making crude and pointless games out of dino bones and his own waste.
Wait a second, this is the wrong script.
Before the classic Five Nights at Freddy's series graced us with its animatronic, furry horror bullshit, there was the real Chuck E. Cheese, written by the ever-eloquent, the Epic 100 of the greatest literature-sharing site on the internet, Wattpad. Chuck E. Cheese is something to behold. It's so bizarre and nonsensical, and yet also totally earnest. You can tell that this was made by some kid who was just trying to have some fun writing about the, admittedly, childhood trauma-inducing animatronics of Chuck E. Cheese. And now, as per request of Juan, thanks Juan, you fucking cocksucker, we're diving into the batshit crazy world of the real Chuck E. Cheese. I'm not gonna go super in-depth like the last few videos, and I'm gonna go over like specific characters, themes, horror, creepypasta, any stuff like that. Nothing that I covered in the previous videos. We all know what you came for. You came to hear me riff on this story, and that is exactly what we're doing. Number 1, what the fuck is even going on? Our story begins with our author telling us that he never found the fucking creepy-ass animatronics at Chuck E. Cheese scary until he learned the truth, all caps. So that's how you can immediately tell this story is bullshit. Those things will fuck you up psychologically. He then says that he was super stoked to go to Chuck E. Cheese the fateful day he learned the truth, which is also how you can tell it's a lie. No one likes Chuck E. Cheese. He busts through the doors and runs around like a little retard who should be put on Adderall. I know I should be on Adderall. He talks about whacking his shark briefly before curiously peeking in a staff-only door that's not locked or even closed. You can hear the scientists inside shouting from where he's standing. At this point, after some more shouting, we now get that famous line. The one famous line that has cemented this story in creepypasta history. We can't just kill that thing! It's a beast version of our mascot! You can't make this shit up. That's a real line in the story. This is a 10 out of 10 already. Number 2, am I on drugs right now? So after hearing this wonderful exchange, his fat ass pushes the door open and he tumbles into the room. Some people grab him and knock him out in a way that the author can't even be bothered to write. He then wakes up tied to a chair, just like in my erotic fan fictions, and sees a doctor wearing, quote, the cleanest white lab coat I'd ever seen. So unless you watch an awful lot of Bill Nye as a kid, there isn't really much competition there. So the scientist thinks this little idiot knows anything about anything, and gets all Chris Hansen grabby when suddenly there's a loud pounding on the metal door. The kid freaks out and, much like clockwork, somehow manages to get out of the bindings used to keep him tied to the chair. It's very difficult to describe what happens next, because the writing here is almost incomprehensible. Like from what I can tell, right? He tries to run off when he finds an air vent at the corner of the room. He starts kicking the grate as the scientist comes closer. I don't know how the scientist doesn't manage to catch up with this little fucker, but he finally gets in, and then he just starts spitting on him.
Is he spitting? Spitting. Oh, spitting at them. Is that the sign? Screw it. Spit! Spit!
Hey, you! Oh, what is wrong with you people?
So he closes the grate back up as something busts into the room the scientist was in, and presumably devours him. Number 3, please send help. I'm being forced to read this against my will. So he scoots on through the air vents as the horrified screams of Chuck E. Cheese genetic scientists fill the air around him, which I'm pretty sure is a sentence that's never been spoken before. Eventually he manages to get back in the building by kicking down another air vent grate. I actually knew a guy in elementary school who did pretty much the exact same thing, but he like ripped out a ceiling tile. He crawled into the ceiling. It was ridiculous. So he runs up to his mom, who presumably ignores the dust, sweat, filth, rat and mouse feces and blood all over him, and just takes him home like nothing even happened. Cops start to show up pretty quickly, and since the mom has clearly been drinking and driving, she hotfoots it out of there. Our narrator is heartbroken that the, quote, once amazing and fun Chuck E. Cheese, unquote, has become something terrifying. His mother's watching the news that night, and he sees a report of a mutated rat creature escaping from Chuck E. Cheese and vanishing into the midnight alleyways. He then vows never to go into a Chuck E. Cheese again, probably because he's older than 6 at this point and has no reason to go there. With that, we've reached our conclusion, and we are all left to wonder what the fuck just happened. Number 4, am I going insane? Everything I just said takes place in about the same amount of time it takes to read it. The pasta is honestly not that long. There's no details or explanation of anything that happens. There's no rhyme or reason for our main character to be involved in them. There's no reason for anything that happens, really. We're left with so many questions. But most importantly, after reading this, we're left with splitting sides and a sore head from how hard we are laughing. This is easily the best pasta on the show so far, because of how completely retarded the whole thing is. It just goes so far that it becomes totally hilarious. It's so much more enjoyable over the uncomfortable rape and beatings of Clockwork or the boring nonsense of Jeff the Killer. Even in a storytelling aspect, it's got a couple things on Jeff and Clockwork. For one, it does try to convince you it's real, even if it does a terrible job at it with a story that makes no sense. It's giving it its best. Another weird thing is that it takes a very Spielberg approach and doesn't reveal the monster's appearance until the very end of the story. We're left to infer what the monster looks like on our own, and that really surprised me. That's actually a big part of the reason why I think this author was being totally serious and earnest when they wrote it. They're trying to make horror here, and while they may fail, I can't fault them for making the most enjoyable story on this show so far. If you're sitting there wondering, should I read the real Chuck E. Cheese? Absolutely. Go ahead and read it. You won't regret it. This is a pretty short episode, so I'm going to introduce a new section of the show where we take a look at some of the comments. Also include a couple from Jeff the Killer and Clockwork in this episode, both because it was so short and so I can make up for the lack of this section in the previous episodes. Unfortunately for this one, we've only got 2 comments, but they're both gems in their own way. Emo Gen the Veal? I don't know if that's supposed to say vile or veil or I don't know what it's trying to say. But he says, this was amazing! 3 exclamation marks. Triforce_hero says, I knew I couldn't trust Chuck E. Cheese! 5 exclamation marks. For Clockwork, we have a few enjoyable ones. Alexandra Dean 1 says, Chris, which is to say Clockwork's boyfriend, is such a dick. Natalie deserves better. She deserves Toby. Toby? Like bad creepypasta Toby? Because I think he'd have some things to say about that.
Just stop!
Here's a great exchange. The 3-legged cat says, this is actually really unrealistic. I'm kind of enjoying it still though. And my cheesy self replied, just shut up! Creepypastas aren't supposed to make sense at all. For Jeff the Killer, we have Ben_drowned who said, this is by far one of the best storylines I've ever read. I'm so sorry, Ben_drowned, you've never read anything in your life. Onyx Genocide says, do you know how long it takes to write a story? My story is short and it took me almost 8 months of revising and writing. I would like to see you write something and then have all of us comment on it. Sound like a plan? I agree with Slenderman comment section ... Onyx Genocide. To which Matthew Sites eloquently replies, I could take 8 hours to shit, but it's still just shit. And on that note, this episode is all wrapped up. Go ahead and leave a request in the comment section, or just tell me what you thought, like these insightful comments. I'll see you all next time.
And there was much defecation.
Yeah, you mentioned that. How long ago did you say this was?
Thousands of years ago.